Who will be the first shocking pick tonight in the HSFF Hours coverage of the Fantasy Pros Championship? How far will certain studs fall, and how high will certain sleepers be drafted? And who will be will one of these players become the $1 million grand prize winner of the Fantasy Pros Championship from this draft this evening? Hop aboard. We have a great show for you. I'm Eric Balkman. Ferrell Elliott is here. Stick around. Your live Fantasy Pros draft coverage on the HSFF Hour starts right now.
Can't stand the pressure. I've seen greater men than these lessons.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Ferrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Ferrell Elliott.
Solace in the scripture. Are we not all our father's sons? I became a man. Nobody ever told me what a man was.
Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you to Rob, our audio engineer, my best friend, and of course, Bryce, our audio engineer, my best friend, and our producer, Rob. Welcome to live coverage of the Fantasy Pros Championship right here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. I'm your host, Eric Balkman. You know me from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network as well. We're going to have live draft coverage once again tonight. These 12 drafters are all gunning for a $1 million grand prize in the Fantasy Pros Championship. I want to remind everybody, if you want to take part in that and go against these guys, you can. 2024 Fantasy Pros Championship drafts are filling up each and every day. You can sign up right now at myffpc.com. We're going to have a ton of them this weekend. The midnight draft, which I'm commissioning tonight, will be there as well. It's open for business. You can definitely sign up for that. It's a $6 million prize pool as well, so there's plenty of action there. The $1 million grand prize is also available in the FFPC main event, which you can sign up for at myffpc.com. The FFPC Best Ball and Superflex Best Ball tournaments are available for just a $35 and $125 entry fee, $300,000 and $100,000 grand prize in those. Empire Leagues as well. Dynasty Startup Leagues are all going on at myffpc.com. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share this with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live. I'm going to try to adjust the screen here so it's a little bit better. Nope, I screwed it up. Sorry, I'm learning on the fly here with everybody else. I know we're almost got one round in. There we go. That is a little bit better. Let's bring in our co-host with the most. He is the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. KFFSC.com is where you want to go. Welcome in Ferrell Elliott. Ferrell, good Friday to you, man.
Hey, Balky. How are you, man?
Doing good. A lot of shows this week as I'm off next week, so I'm trying to cram everything in. And what better way to culminate our week of podcasting than with you covering a live draft with me, as these guys are all going for a $1 million grand prize. The stakes are high, but that's the way we like some.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Balky. And there's a lot to learn tonight. There's some really good drafters in this group. Veterans of Las Vegas and Kentucky as well. And Tom Smith kicked us off with no surprise. Christian McCaffrey is one of our all-time favorite California Kentuckians right there. And it's a good situation to start your draft with Christian McCaffrey. I'll stick by that all year.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm not really going to fault you for that at all. If anybody wants to take McCaffrey number one, that's totally fine by me. I think you can there's a lot other nits we can pick at rather than that. As you had said, Tom Smith is actually had the number one pick tonight, the Yum Yums 8 team. Jeremy Brock, our good buddy from Kentucky, is drafting second tonight. There's a lot of former guests of the show drafting this. John Terry is drafting third. Vladimir Dukic is fourth. Remy LeBeau, our good buddy Remy LeBeau, is hitting fifth tonight. You have Craig Bruder in the sixth hole. Frank Imbornoni, who seemingly is on every single FFPC live draft that we have on YouTube. He's picking seventh. Joe Ligon is 8th. Nathan Harris is 9th. Bill Wonky, another former guest of the show, is 10th. Derek Greer, who we just had on these airwaves a couple of months ago, is 11th. And then Adam Hahn picking 12th. Let's take you through it right now, ladies and gentlemen. After McCaffrey went number 1, we saw CeeDee Lamb at 2. Bijan Robinson goes at the 103 tonight, followed by a pair of receivers in Tyreek Hill and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Breece Hall after that, followed by Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. 2 guys that were going like 1-2 last year are now going 8-9, or tonight they went 7-8 tonight. Jahmyr Gibbs, Puka Nacua, Marvin Harrison creeps in to the first round, followed by A.J. Brown. I can't remember who said this. It might have been Dan Williamson, somebody on a recent podcast, or maybe it was Mike Shope said, basically, A.J. Brown is contractually obligated to go at the 1-2 turn every single year in FFPC drafts, and he goes here tonight at the 112. So a lot to unpack in this first round. Ferrell, I think the first thing I want to talk to you a little bit about is that Jamar Chase pick at 7. The more content I consume, the more I read, the more I'm listening to, I'm starting to sour a little bit on the Bengals offense. You know, we had Nelson Sousa on with Aiden LaCorey and Dave Terpoli on Tuesday night for Fantasy Pros live draft coverage. He says he's getting a bad vibe out of there with Joe Burrow, still not recovered from the surgery. Chase and Higgins both want new deals. With everything going on in Cincinnati right now, would you be shying away from Jamar Chase at the 107 where he went tonight?
88 miles south of Paul Brown Stadium here in Louisville, and an event in the greater Cincinnati area on August 18th. We'll have our share of Bengals supporters. But, when things go wrong contractually there, they seem to stay wrong. The team has a history of not being able to stand prosperity in the areas of salary. And so I don't know. If I'm in the second part of the first round and I see Chase and Jefferson dropping to me, I'm a very, very happy drafter to be taking those guys that early. I don't think you should sire on him, but yes, he was a 1-2. He was a 2-3, sometimes 4 guy. Now he's moving backwards.
I can't believe I'm saying this. I think I like Jefferson a little bit better than Chase, especially, you wouldn't think a lot of people would say that based on the Cincinnati offense and the Cincinnati quarterback, and then based on what we have in Minnesota right now. But I do think I like Jefferson a little bit better. It's very, very close. And anybody who wants to take Chase over Jefferson, I get it. Puka Nacua sneaks into the first round here tonight. 111 is his ADP, but the one I think we should talk about here is Marvin Harrison, a guy who normally goes at the 205. Tonight, he ends up sneaking into the 111 slot. Now, according to the Fantasy Mojo on him, this is the earliest he's gone in the last 5 days in any Fantasy Pros Championship draft. FantasyMojo.com is a great website. I encourage you to subscribe to that. If you play in the FFPC, it is a super handy tool to have, not only for the ADP, but for the stack finder. Darren Armani, the guy who runs it, is also the godfather of the Fantasy Football Players Championship Pros versus Joes Challenge, which will be broadcasting those drafts live coming up at the end of next month as well at Fantasy Mojo on the X. Ferrell, you got to get your guys. My question here, and I'm looking at this, that was Derek Greer, who took Marvin Harrison at the 111. He wanted him. He wanted to get his guy. He probably could have got him at the 202. He gets him at the 111 tonight. Yeah,
so the mix of Adams over Brown, but you can't argue with the player if you believe in the player. And Harrison is likely to have a very big season, probably a bigger season at the end of the year. I have no complaints with what Derek is doing. He's trying to get out here and play with a little pizzazz in the first round.
Pizzazz indeed, and that's what we like to see. We like to see nobody comes on these live drafts to draft an average team. Everybody wants to show out, and Marvin Harrison was a show out pick tonight, and it could end up working out as well. 3 tight ends go in the second round here. We'll get things going. Sam Laporta to team 12, followed by Devontae Adams, and then Garrett Wilson to pair with Puka Nacua for team 10. Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Taylor right after that, a couple of stalwarts at the start of the first round just a year or two ago, and now they have fallen to the early second. Travis Kelce is the second tight end off the board to team 7. Chris Olave goes with Breece Hall to team 6. Trey McBride, the third tight end selected tonight, he goes at 208, followed by Drake London, Derrick Henry, Mike Evans and Michael Pittman round out the second round of tonight's proceedings. What do you make of the Devontae Adams pick? I know that Barney Newkirk is in the Facebook chat right now, and he says, "My Lord, what is Team 11 doing?" Adams, again, it's a get your guy scenario, Ferrell. He normally goes at the 209. Derek Greer went up and grabbed him at the 201. And Derek does a lot of drafts, and I don't know if he's trying to be different and separate himself from the other teams that are drafting the 11 spot, or if he just wants variance on his own teams. But he clearly had a draft plan in mind tonight, and he's executing it.
Yeah, if I didn't go running back there, I would have drafted Adams too. I don't see a problem with it. It's interesting how the tight ends are falling and how quickly they're coming off the board. I guess that is typical now that we're with Andrews through the third. But yeah, no, I have no problem with Team 11. And the only problem I have is when we start pointing at teams to be great or to be questionable, we don't get a follow-up on who wins these things. Right. And those are players that can deliver.
The other thing that I'm noticing tonight is receivers getting pushed up a little bit. Now, Drake London falls. Chris Olave normally goes at the 210. He goes in the mid-second tonight. Mike Evans normally 305. He goes at the 211. And then Michael Pittman normally is being drafted at the 311. He goes at the 212 tonight. Ferrell, I know you love yourself some Michael Pittman. Do you love him that much as Tom Smith does at the one spot?
Well, there's the question. He's targeted his two players, and if you want Pittman, that's where you're going to have to take Pittman. Pittman is better for me than Samuel, Ayuk, Kupp, and the receivers that follow. So yes, I don't have a problem there with Pittman.
Yeah, and again, you're talking about a guy who could see a lot of targets on an offense that, quite frankly, is ascending. I still think they're going to be run dominant this year. But even the most run-dominant teams are going to feature at least one receiver, especially a guy with Pittman's ilk, that he's going to get a lot of targets there this year. I'm not a strong enough man to do it, but drafting on the ends, Ferrell, this comes into the drafting philosophy of this. I think, now you always say you don't want to be in the middle of these things. You would rather be on the end?
Well, every year is different, and I have had great comfort drafting in the middle this year so far. The ends for me generally seems like I have less decisions, and so I can make better decisions, and I can move players out of my mindset and focus on a smaller set of players, because as I know, as I'm going in either direction, I'm not going to get those players. So that's not rocket science for these guys. I'm Captain Obvious, but sometimes that's an advantage. What happens is, if you end up getting in a spot you don't like, and you repetitively end up drafting from that spot, you have a hard time differentiating your team. Those are all things that can happen to you, and I think the ends kind of cure that.
Yeah, the ends definitely cure that for sure. We have a situation going on the far right of the board that I'm going to get into in a little bit. The third round is now complete. We saw Tom Smith get Dalton Kincaid at the 301. Deebo Samuel, the third straight wide receiver drafted by Jeremy Brock. No surprise there, in my opinion. At the 302 for him to start three straight receivers. We see real-life teammates go back-to-back to John Terry, Derrick Henry in the second, and now Mark Andrews in the third. Brandon Ayuk, the third straight receiver drafted by Vladimir Dukic, followed by Cooper Kupp, and then a bunch of running backs. Isaiah Pacheco, Devon Achane, Kyron Williams falls to the 308 tonight, and then Travis Etienne at the 309. What's interesting about that is Nathan Harris has now started his draft with three straight running backs. That's the only team that went running back to start. And then we get a lot of yellow for these last three picks here. Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, Malik Neighbors. Now, Collins for Bill Wonky, Waddle for Derek Greer make them two of four teams to start with three straight receivers tonight. Malik Neighbors, the final pick for Adam Hahn there in the 12 spot. But Ferrell, I think one of the things that is always interesting to me, and I don't know if you've ever had this in your draft, but if you have a certain start, like three straight receivers or three straight running backs, and the team next to you does the exact opposite. Like in this case, Nathan Harris takes those three running backs, Wonky takes the three wide receivers. I think that's always interesting when you're going back to back against each other, because now you would like to think that some value is going to fall to you and you're not beating up on the guy next to you.
And you're moving fast in these drafts. I'm a proponent of slow drafting. So, my head is spinning in this kind of format. So you don't have a real big, long time to break down what the next guy is going to do. But I'm always pleased when at the pick here, that's team number, 9, that went 3 running backs. I think I would have had a hard time passing on Collins there for Etienne. And I just might have, tonight, assuming that none of the other drafters would have won him, and it doesn't act like they're valuing running backs. Yeah, I might have had Etienne in the 4th. So I like the way he's counter punching here, because I believe the receivers, as we move down the board, have a lot of skills and a lot of receptions for them. So I think we can score fantasy points moving down the boards and receivers. Someday in this draft, sometime tonight, Balky, before we go off the air, these guys are going to draft some running backs. And we'll eventually see that those running backs kind of run out early.
I would agree with that. And I think if you are going to go wide receiver heavy or wide receiver tight end heavy early, then obviously these teams are going to be really, really fighting amongst themselves for those mid-round running backs, guys that, maybe are only going to have a pocket of value of maybe 2 or 3 weeks this season, but sometimes that's enough to get you by.
And when more than one team is doing it, and they're your neighbors,
right?
Now you've got a situation. If I'm going to be like Brother Greer here on Team 11, I don't necessarily want to be sandwiched between 2 teams that don't have any running backs either.
Mm-hmm. There's 2 other things are players I want to talk about in the 3rd round. It's Rams moving in different directions. So we'll talk about Cooper Kupp first. He ends up going at the 305 tonight to Remy LeBeau. 401 is where he normally goes. That's a little bit more than a half round of difference in ADP. And I think it's interesting because we saw some positive news come out about Cooper Kupp this week. We saw Sean McVay telling all of us that, none of us had any idea how badly hurt he was last year. The workouts that he's doing with Puka Nacua, where he wanted to start almost right after the Super Bowl or right after the season ended, I can't remember which. He didn't take much time off. And the fact that he has looked so good, again, no pads, but he's looked very, very good in practices so far. That bumped Cooper Kupp up tonight, and I wonder what his ADP plan is for the remainder of drafting season, because I could still see him ascend a little bit more, Ferrell.
I can too, and I think that's a good thing for all fantasy players to remember. They talk about players losing a step, but they don't follow the injury reports as close as they should, and that helps from year to year. And the coaches say, "Well, Cooper Kupp's looking a lot better." That means they can see him. He's not in the training room. He's out on the field. He's moving around. Good stuff for Cooper Kupp, and that's what we want. He's tough as nails anyway. He plays through injuries. He's the kind of player that won't leave the field. I'm a big Cooper Kupp fan. I don't get him in drafts as much as I would like to. I had him very early in his career. This might be the year. I don't want him to ascend too far before we get back to Planet Hollywood, because I'd like to have him on some of those live teams.
The other, his real life teammate, the other player I want to talk about in the 3rd round, Kyron Williams, normally going at the 212. He falls to the 308 tonight. A lot of really experienced drafters in this draft room tonight. And Ferrell, I think this is Kyron Williams' future. He was dealing with the foot injury this offseason. There's been a lot of pub for Blake Corum. The Rams saying that they want him to learn to be a 3-down back and not just a change of pace guy or anything like that. These are all things that point in the direction of Corum, and I'm a little surprised Kyron Williams still has an ADP of a late 2nd-round pick over the last 5 days. I think he's going to continue to fall, and I'm not at all surprised that Kupp goes in front of him tonight.
Yeah, and we said on Wednesday night that we want to be in business, at least I did. I want to be in business with the Rams receivers. I'll let everyone else figure out the running backs. Williams, I love watching him play. He's a hard runner. It reminds me of Pacheco at Kansas City. There's certain things that I think he brings to that backfield in an attitude that other running backs wouldn't. But yes, I'm no wiser 48 hours later than I was on Wednesday night about this player, and I'm just going to basically say someone else will draft him.
We had a situation in the 4th round tonight where Adam Hahn, I think it was Adam Hahn, he's in the 12th spot tonight, right? I'm not making that up.
Yes, sir.
He's in the 12th spot. He had an opportunity to pair A.J. Brown with Devonta Smith at the 401. He chose not to. He went with DJ Moore instead. Somebody in the YouTube chat, and I can't remember who it was, but they said it was a missed opportunity to where they could have put Smith on that team. I don't think you could have gotten Smith and Hurts, but Smith and Brown on the same team. Ferrell, where do you stand on that? Where if you can get 2 elite receivers on the same team, you think about Chase and Higgins, think about Brown and Devonta Smith, Puka Nacua and Kupp. If you don't get the quarterback, is that still something that you would look at doing?
Yes, and those 2 players are elite within their skill set. Brown and Devonta Smith are 2 completely different players. Chase and Higgins are utilized differently. One is speed and one is strength, but they're closer together. I really like what the Eagles are going to have to do, and they're going to have to score the ball. They're going to have to move the ball to outscore what their defense gives up is what I expect. So, yeah, the ball is going to be flying through the air there. I'm trying to separate myself from the last 6 games for the season for the Eagles last year and focus and function on what we know about the Eagles' skill set of those players, and those 2 of the better skilled receivers in the draft. And I would have rather had Smith and Neighbors there, certainly.
We're coming up on the end of the 5th round, but more 4th round conversation here. Evan Engram, Ferrell, goes to Frank Imbornoni. What's interesting about that is his 2nd tight end. He's in the 7th spot tonight. He had Kelsey in the 2nd round. He gets Evan Engram in the 4th round. You know, I'm seeing Engram more and more be the first tight end off the board how do I want to say this? I oftentimes see him as the first tight end off the board to a team that already has a tight end. So he's like the 2nd tight end basically for that team. I've seen it a lot this year. That dude had an incredible year last year. Now he stayed healthy. Beware the career year. But I think I just took Evan Engram in a KFFSC main event too. And I look at him, I see a lot of targets again this year. And it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the room reacts. We already have a reaction for Bill Wonky at 10 with the tight ends. But anytime that one team doubles up on tight end first, all of a sudden you have a decision to make. The other 11 teams have a decision to make. Are you going to let it slip, or are you going to pick up a tight end before they go here? And Kelsey and Engram are definitely forcing the issue with Imbornoni's team at the 7 hole.
And I really like that. I'm tempted to do that quite often. He might have done it. He might have gone a little early, especially with what we had on the left side of the board. But I don't know. Ingram is a good pick everywhere. I was not an Ingram fan when he was a Giant, but I am definitely a fan of him now. And I don't see any reason that he's going to falter in his progress as one of the top fantasy tight ends.
We have Amari Cooper going a little bit, I would say almost a full round ahead of ADP. Remy LeBeau, once again, getting his guys. He got Cooper Kupp in the 3rd round. He gets Amari Cooper in the 4th round. This is a player I'm starting to warm up to a little bit, and the fact that he's Remy LeBeau's 3rd wide receiver on his team tonight, that is very intriguing to me. A wide receiver 24. I forget what a productive season he had last year, both with Deshaun Watson and Joe Flacco. And I don't want to say I'm starting to sour on the Joe Flacco effect, but I'm starting to think that, you think about David Njoku, who just went off the board in the 6th round. I think these guys are still going to get it done with Watson this year. I don't think the offense just falls off. I think they're too good. I think they're too well coached. And I think Cooper's a little bit underpriced right now, although he did almost go a full round ahead of his ADP tonight, Ferrell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's going to end up back where we're more traditionally seeing Amari Cooper. We've got a lot of action. I'm not giving weather reports for week 14, but we've got a lot of action. And what is his bye week, Cooper? It's early, isn't it?
10. He's got a bye week of 10 this year.
Yeah, so we've got a situation where, and I'm not particularly sure in this format, but in the main event, that we're going to try to be winning games late in the year and in week 14 with very, very good players, 6 teams worth of wide receivers on bye. And so I think if you have an Amari Cooper on your roster, you're going to be ahead of a lot of the other teams that you might be playing in that championship game. Just having Amari Cooper available is a good thing. So, yeah, availability in the playoffs impressed me in what we're dealing with this year.
Jeremy Brock, I've drafted with him or against him in Kentucky many times, and he loves his wide receivers early. He did the same thing in the FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship tonight. But remember, in this format, you only have to start 2 receivers. He had to be pleased as punch to start off his draft with 3 receivers. He gets a top 8 tight end in Jake Ferguson, and then he gets Rachaad White as the 14th running back off the board at the 502, nearly a full round after his ADP. That is what you're looking for on the ends, Ferrell, when a guy like that can fall to you. And he could be your number 1 running back when you already have all those pass catchers. I'm a little surprised he fell. Is there anything that's been coming out with Rachaad White or anything you believe about Rachaad White that you think high stakes players are letting him slip a little bit too far right now?
I think the player is just classically underrated, and all he does is show up and gain yards. And maybe it is the change. Canellis moving on to Carolina. Maybe that's in someone's head. I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be going higher. And I could say the same thing. I've always been a big proponent of Kenneth Walker, and these are, but we're beginning to see that thinning. As soon as you see Ramondre Stevenson get drafted, you begin to look for the running back thinning a little bit.
The other thing that we have tonight is now that the 5th round is complete, we have the top 3 receivers off the Houston Texans all selected tonight. Collins went in the 3rd, Diggs went in the 4th, Tank Dell went in the 5th. Ferrell, that is a lot of draft capital for 3 receivers all on the same team. Are you worried about any one of those 3 guys not living up to their ADP this season, especially where they went tonight?
No. If any of them don't, it's likely Dell. But he will have such big splash games that the people that own him will be satisfied when he has the big game. So one of them is going to do a little less than someone hoped for, but none of them will be a bust, and all of them will catch a lot of passes.
Go back to Derek Greer's team here, as he's now made 6 picks from the 11 spot. We talked about how he went out and got his guys with Harrison and Adams. Mm-hmm. He gets Waddle and Metcalf after that, so he's got 4 really dynamic receivers. And then again, Kenneth Walker is another player that he can get, and you feel all right about that as your starting number 1 running back when you have those 4 receivers. And then David Njoku right at ADP tonight too as the 11th tight end off the board. He's got some work to do at running back, but I think Kenneth Walker is a good start here, Ferrell.
I do too. Just there's nothing I don't like about Walker. I've compared him to the skill set of Hall. Hall has broken loose. Walker will soon be behind.
The pick that was very intriguing to me, and it's something I alluded to earlier, first pick of the 6th round was Brock Bowers, right? Mm-hmm. And he is a player that not only gets pushed up the board a little bit, I think his ADP is like usually in the mid-6th, but he goes to a team in Adam Hahn who already has a tight end. We talked about the situation that Frank Imbornoni created in the middle of the draft when he took Evan Engram in the 4th round, and all of a sudden we see Bill Wonky with Pitts and Kittle back-to-back in the 4th and 5th round. We still see 1, 2, 3, 4 teams without tight ends, and it's going to be interesting to see how they sort of fill in the cracks here and maybe take a quantity approach here in the mid-rounds before they start drying up for sure. So Brock Bowers joins Hahn's team with Sam Laporta in that tight end room. Alvin Kamara at the 603, followed by Hollywood Brown after that. Aaron Jones and Zamir White, Ferrell, go back-to-back. Aaron Jones right at ADP, Zamir White a little bit before. Those 2 running backs are sort of in opposite directions, right? You have one guy that's, neither one of them were very pedigreed, but Aaron Jones was one of the best running backs in the NFL in his prime. And you have Zamir White with the Raiders this year. He should be the guy, but there's also an Amir Abdullah there, and there's some other running backs there that could obviously join the team. Alexander Madison is there as well. When you're picking in the mid-6th round and Jones and White are staring you in the face, would you have made the same decision at 8 that Joe Ligon did in taking Jones over Zamir White?
No, I would have taken White because White's got the significant upside. Jones is a very good player. We've seen the best that Jones is going to do. And I don't necessarily like the mix of the situation around him. But in Raider land, I do. And I don't have to – I'm not imagining that Dak Prescott becomes a Raider or any of these kind of things. Right. I like the team as it comes out. And I think that, here we have Bowers and we have White. both available in this round, and I think that's significant value getting in business with those two players from that team. So I think that's a great number 2 running back. I would have preferred to have had him the prior team as my number 3 running back.
I always say it's a young man's game, right? And Zamir White's significantly younger than Aaron Jones. I want to get back to what Jimmy Williams is saying in the chat right now. He's noticing in his leagues this year that there's a lot more 2 tight end teams by round 6 that he is seeing in his FFPC drafts this year. Ferrell, you've done a lot of FFPC drafts. What's the proper way to handle this? I guess some of it depends upon team construction. You like to force the issue sometimes with your tight ends. Where have you been getting your second tight end in your drafts this year? Have you been trying to get it by round 6?
I have.
Okay.
Anywhere between Ferguson and Freiermuth. Occasionally I've done what our drafters done here with Evan Ingram, but usually between Ferguson, Bowers, and Freiermuth, and I do love having that player. And the guys in the chat, and maybe I led them down that road talking about bye weeks, but I find the cure for bye weeks and even injured players at all positions in the FFPC to be 2 strong tight ends and maybe a development guy that might show something later on. Maybe in the double-digit rounds, playing a little keep away with other tight ends.
Yeah, I think if you can pull that off, it's smart to do. I think in a KFFSC draft, I usually like to lead the draft with 2 tight ends. If I was drafting the FFPC, I definitely would want to have 3, given that tight end premium. I think it's always important to have that third tight end. Now, it kind of depends upon team construction. Maybe if you go with one of these top 5 guys, you're not drafting a third tight end. But I don't think it hurts either. The player I want to talk with you a little bit about was Jonathan Brooks here to Fozzie Dog. That's Jeremy Brock from the 2-hole tonight. Now, he had Rashad White fall almost a full round to him to get him in the early 5th round. But then he reaches not always a bad thing because you want to get your guys. He reaches almost a full round to get Jonathan Brooks. My concern with Jonathan Brooks this year, Ferrell, is that this is a guy that may not be ready to go at the start of the season, or maybe won't play to the level you would expect Jonathan Brooks to because he's coming off that ACL tear. I like the White pick, but Brooks is your second running back. I don't know if that's enough for me with Jeremy. Given the way he started with those receivers, I might be pounding running backs hard here in the middle rounds because I don't know if Brooks is going to be a contributor maybe until later on in the season.
I think I will too. But, the Fossey Dog has his own way of doing things, and you look a little askance at it sometimes, but at the end of the day, he's always in the mix. And, usually he's doing it from the 12 position. So his whole world is off its axis right now, drafting from the number 2 position. But, I think you're right. He's going to bounce back with running backs. There were guys I liked better than Brooks, but, there's a lot of youthful he went veteran receivers. So he's going to go youth at the tight end running back position. He's getting those rookies in there. Possibly.
He did go back to the wide receiver well at the 702 tonight with Ladd McConkey. That is a really interesting situation you have in Los Angeles this year with no Mike Williams, no Keenan Allen. You have Quentin Johnston, who I don't know. I'm not a fan of. I don't think he has a sophomore leap this year. I think Joshua Palmer is what he is. He's going to flash, but he's not going to be the guy. But Ladd McConkey could be that guy, and Jeremy might have struck gold here at the wide receiver 36 at the 702 tonight. Is it gold or is it fool's gold for McConkey at that price, Ferrell?
I think it's gold. And I think it, again, an ascending player. To mix with his veteran receivers is a good guy to have. I really like what he's done receiver-wise, and he's got one of my favorite tight ends.
And Jake Ferguson from the University of Wisconsin.
Get that into the book.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to plug my state. Let's talk about Frank Imbornone's team from the 7 spot tonight. So he gets Jamar Chase with his first pick. We talked about how he doubled up on tight ends. He gets Patrick Mahomes. We talked about his Zamir White pick. But look what he did for his second wide receiver and third wide receiver tonight. He goes Rashee Rice at the 707, Xavier Worthy at the 806 as his number 2 and number 3 receivers. Now, I think that's interesting in best ball How does that philosophy grab you? Again, looking at what he has structured in the first 6 rounds and then knowing his number 2 and number 3 receivers are both going to be on the same team. Fine for best ball because you don't have to worry about when to start them. This format, though, you do.
Well, he's assuming that if one of them's not available, the other one will be, and that position is worth more than a 7th, 8th round pick. And you can make that solid argument. Plus, he's stacking them with his quarterback. So I'm okay with that. There's a lot of receivers that I like better than Worthy, but I understand what he's doing, and I see no problem with it. He's going to start those 2 tight ends. So really, he's thinking about Chase and one other.
And that's the thing. I mean, that's what will drive me batty if I was going to do that this year. To have to pick between Rice and Worthy, and we'll see what he hits on for receiver. I mean, maybe he hits somebody late and it makes it easier. But right now, you're trying to decide between Rice and Worthy could be difficult. Now, if Rice is suspended or something like that, well, boom, Xavier Worthy becomes an automatic start, right?
Maybe
we don't know if that's going to happen.
Maybe.
Oh, you're not even sold on that.
I'm not. I look at I look at the way Worthy's built, and it to me it's hard. It will be very difficult for an offense like the way they expect you to play in Kansas City, which has physicality at the position. They don't be fooled. We've all seen these speed guys at the position, but we see a lot of guys out there that are physical. They demand physicality at the position, and they want somebody to run the patterns and run deep routes and be accurate catching the ball with this quarterback. But I don't know how often he's going to be on the field. I don't know if he's going to be a high-volume participant in this offense no matter what happens to Rice. I can't assume that he's going to get 90% of the snaps or 80% of the snaps. And so if you're not doing that as a rookie and as a downfield specialist, your career could look a little bit like Bateman did over at to start his career over at
Baltimore. Yeah. Let's talk about Bill Wonke's team from the 10 hole. So he was in an interesting spot where the guy in the 9 hole right next to him, drafting 9th, which is Nathan Harris, he went running back to start. Bill went receiver to start, which is good, except for Derek Greer also went with 4 straight receivers to start his draft. So Bill has to be concerned, I think, much more so what Derek is doing at the 11 spot rather than what Nathan's doing at the 9 spot. What do you make of his team? 3 receivers. He gets Pitts and Kittle back to back, which I like. But then you're looking at Alvin Kamara and Najee Harris as your top 2 running backs here. And I understand running back is a position in this format, a managed league with waivers. You'll be able to attack that position a little bit more. But I'd be very nervous about those top 2 running backs, even as good as a team that he's put together here in the first 5 rounds before it. Kamara and Harris, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't either. Let's hang around and see if he takes Ezekiel.
Mm-hmm.
But probably what I would have done differently is wait on Kittle. I think Kittle's days of being a real complimentary high fantasy football scoring tight end is just not there. I think maybe Freiermuth outscores him this year. I think maybe Goddard outscores him. And I really, really suspect Bowers to outscore him. So that's it. And his teachers traditionally picked here. People love him. I don't know if I would have done that. And that would have allowed him to have Walker, probably a running back that I'm higher on than he is, and Zamir White, which is how I would have put that team together. And I'd be waiting for one of these other tight ends that I just mentioned. But, if you hit it correctly with Harris or with Kamara, whose careers are far from being over, this team could really, really shine. So not the way I would have done it, but I can understand why he did it that way. Duvey over here is making he made a really interesting commentary. If you go back here, he says, feel like half or more of these rookies, and I think he's talking about receivers, are going to come up short. But hey, you never know. I think he's statistically and historically correct.
I would agree.
And that's what we need to remind ourselves And that's why some of the rookies that are available in these double-digit rounds, I might like just as much as some of the guys that we see going off now.
I'm really starting to like Derek's team here, Derek Greer's team. When you have
he's crazy. He went all of those receivers,
right? Yeah,
it's absolutely crazy.
And the thing is, when you have those 4 stud receivers, and now you get Njoku, by the way, it's not like he ignored tight end. He's still got a top 11 tight end on his team with Njoku. But Kenneth Walker and Zach Moss and Blake Corum and Javonte Williams, like, you're kind of going to know who's going to have the best matchup from week to week, and you can exploit those running backs a little bit more. And when you have those other 4 receivers to fall back on, assuming Harrison and Adams are able to return the value that Greer gave them when he overdrafted them according to ADP, which is fine. You want to get your guys, and he did. And if that happens, then all of a sudden this team's looking pretty good. I like the construction here. Don't maybe necessarily agree with all the player selections, but I like the construction of going receiver heavy right away and then sort of pounding running backs. He gets Kyler Murray here in the 10th round. I think this is a good way to go about it. You can tell he's drafted a lot of teams.
And you can convince yourself. All you had to do is convince yourself that I must pound the running backs. And he seemed to me to have got the best option that he possibly could have got there. And I think Javonte Williams at the bottom of the draft, we're hearing a lot about McLaughlin right now. But I believe Javonte Williams will return from that injury, and we're not going to see a Javonte Williams average 3.8 yards a carry next year. We're going to see a different kind of player.
Duvey also points out, because Austin Eckler just went at the 905 after Derrick Henry went at the 210. He said, if Eckler is indeed 100%, how come he is so far behind Derrick Henry? Aren't they similar bets, catches versus TDs? So there's a lot to unpack there. And he's right. I mean, there are 7 rounds of difference. I heard some fantasy pundits talking the other day, like Eckler was a player that we were choosing in the first half of the first round last year, and all of a sudden he's going 8 rounds later. Seems a little bizarre. So I do believe you can make the case that Eckler could climb up a little bit higher. There is a non-zero chance that it wasn't an injury. It was actually age that he was showing last year, and that's not going to get any better. And I don't believe his offensive line is near as good as Baltimore's, and this could be the best offensive line Derrick Henry's ever run behind. I would agree with Duvey that Eckler should be going higher, and I probably wouldn't take Derrick Henry at the 210. But I still think like the upside with Henry still continues to be a lot higher than Eckler.
I think Henry will score more fantasy points than Taylor and Barkley. And I think Eckler will outscore most of these guys that are being drafted in front of him from the 5th round down. And that's they shouldn't be any closer than they are. I'm a big Henry supporter, and I know what I have a very, very strong inclination of why Baltimore took him. And the watching the Ravens is going to be the game that will take me off of the red zone and onto the Ravens versus their matchup. Maybe I'm going to have dual screens.
Yeah, you might have. It's probably just a good idea to have that in general. That's what I do every Sunday for sure. We've been talking about the right side of the board quite a bit, Ferrell. Let's get over to the left side of the board specifically.
Some guys over there.
Yeah, Tom Smith from the 1 spot tonight. If you look at you just look no further than the color, right? I mean, he is a rainbow over there, whereas a lot of the guys on the right side of the board went with blocks of green, blocks of yellow, even blocks of purple to a certain extent. I wonder if Tom, drafting from the 1 spot, looks at this like, okay, I'm on the end here. I kind of got to pick and choose not only to build my team the right way, but take value when it comes. So he's got a very balanced team. He's got 3 running backs through 8 rounds. Through 11 rounds, he has 5 receivers. He's already doubled up on tight ends, 2 young guys in Kincaid and Musgrave, and he has Anthony Richardson there as well. It's interesting, the dichotomy of all the different ways you can build a team. Tom's taken an interesting approach tonight, just not necessarily going out of his way to grab guys, but catching the value when it falls to him. He's another guy that's done a lot of drafts this year too.
Yeah, and find me a player on his team that you don't like, and find me a player that you say, wow, he could, sky's the limit for this kind of player. He could be amongst the best. He always is. There's not a player there that even has any potential of being a bust in their respective offense.
Scott Hoyt is watching this on Facebook, longtime FFPC player. And he points out John Terry's team at 3, which I don't think we've mentioned at all. John Terry does a lot of these live on YouTube drafts as well. And he's one of these guys that always sneaks below the radar for me because I just because I kind of always expect him to draft a really good team, and he always does. And I just fully expect it, so I don't talk about it enough. But let's talk about John Terry's team here from 3 because Scott Hoyt's loving it. He started off with Robinson, Henry, Andrews, and then pounded the receivers with Diggs and Kirk and Ridley and Hopkins. Odunze went back to the running back well with Devin Singletary. And then he gets – I love this pairing of quarterbacks here, pun intended, Love and Daniels. Now, say what you will about it. Yeah, I love my Green Bay Packers. But at the same time, Jordan Love is an ascending quarterback. I'm still not convinced that he doesn't take a bit of a step back this year. We've seen it with a lot of quarterbacks before. I don't think he's going to be awesome all season long, but I do think he's worth the 10-10. I think he's worth the quarterback 10 pick. And then you have Jaden Daniels going right after him, a guy that, quite frankly, if things fall right, he could be like a top 7, top 6 quarterback this year in fantasy. So to get those two guys when you already pounded all these other skill position players, this is another strong draft through 11 rounds from John Terry, who has won a boatload of cash in the FFPC.
I love everything about this team. I thought that Kirk, who I value as a player, I thought that maybe Kirk was a little earlier than what we've been seeing with him. Odunze, they're talking about installing as a return man. I found that very interesting. And then Singletary. I think that's one of his better picks because this player has a defined role and a meaningful expectation from his team. And then Love, I drafted Love, oh goodness, like 11 or 12 in a league this week, and I tried to match a quarterback with him, the second quarterback, to try to find the difficult matchups for Love during the season, and I really can't find any on paper right now. I like going to battle with him. He's a week 10 bye, and so it really didn't matter as long as my guy was playing week 10 who I picked, because I think Love will be the guy for most of the games.
Remy LeBeau is on the clock right now. He has not taken a non-running back since round 6. He's gone with 5 straight running backs in a row after not taking one in the first 6 rounds. He does take Brandon Cooks there, but he went Montgomery, Pollard, Eckler, Gus Edwards, and Kamani Vidal, who is getting a lot of love from the YouTube chat tonight, saying that this is the sleeper, this is the running back that you want to own, and he gets them in the 11th round tonight. Ferrell, if that's the case, if there is so much love with Vidal, why is he going so low? And is his trajectory in the FFPC drafts pointing up as we get deeper into drafting season?
Yeah, I think he's a player that not everyone was that familiar with. And then we have a coach that says, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. So naturally, he's going to be a guy that draws some attention. And if we see him in the preseason, there's certain players that don't have much preseason. Mm-hmm. But, based on the way he's pounding the running backs here, we're about to see him go out of business in the running back position. But he's got what he needs, especially since he waited on it. And look at the quality of the wide receiver that he got in the 12th round.
That's another thing, too, because I've heard I take that back. I heard a lot of people talking up Jalen Tolbert. I apologize. I know he hasn't been taken yet. And now it seems like it's rebounding a little bit to Cooks because Dak Prescott has this relationship with Brandon Cooks on the field, and they have this connection. And then I look at the Cowboys running back situation. I'm like, God, they're not going to run the ball. And then I look at their head coach, and I'm like, God, they're not going to run the ball. Like they're going to pass the ball a ton this year. And we know Lamb's going to get his. You and I both like Ferguson as well. But Brandon Cooks in the 12th round, that's another guy that I think get him while you can now because I think he's going to go higher.
Yeah, and Jalen Tolbert, he is a project wide receiver that Dallas has always had at their 4 or 5 receiver. And it's been interesting historically. You can see those guys leave the Cowboys and contribute other places, but none of them really break out. I don't think this player breaks out. Brandon Cooks, wherever he might be, is a number 2 wide receiver for a team. And yeah, Balky, you said something about the team throwing the ball.
Yeah, they're going to be doing it a bunch. They are going to be doing it a bunch this year for sure. And so when you have the opportunity to draft somebody like that in the 12th round, who could be, I mean, what's the ceiling for targets? I mean, could he see 120, 130 targets this year?
Well, let's don't go crazy because they do have a tight end there. But yes, it could be.
Yeah. And so I love that pick. And Cooks is a guy that, quite frankly, again, I have not been drafting a whole lot this year, but I definitely could see him on a lot more of my teams if he stays at that level, which he very well could going forward.
And if we're wrong about him, he's still a 65 catch receiver in the 12th round.
Right, exactly. Let's talk about all these young running backs that went in the 12th round here. Marshawn Lloyd to Frank Imbornoni. Ray Davis in Buffalo goes to John Terry, and then Bucky Irving out of Tampa ends up going to Jeremy Brock here. Do you have a favorite running back out of those 3? I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation because you know which one I'm going to take, and it is the Green Bay Packer.
Yeah, well, Davis is my guy because he's from Kentucky, and that he's not because he's from Kentucky, but because I'm familiar with him. I know his story. And he will not be denied. If you don't know his story, look it up. You're going to learn an appreciation for him. I was getting him in the 14th round here amongst the experts, 12th round. This is what I'm talking about of the running backs beginning to thin. But I don't think this team can get through an entire year without somebody saying, let's get the Davis kid on the field and give him the ball. And that's the kind of player he's that I think he is. He will not be denied the opportunity. So he's my favorite.
And I listen, I don't have a problem with that. I think when I look at how the Buffalo Bills running backs might be drafted in 2025, I think James Cook and Ray Davis are going to be much, much closer. If not having Davis in front of James Cook next year, I think there's a non-zero chance of that as well. Derek Greer ends up going with the top 4 receivers to start off his draft. He doesn't go back to the receiver well until the 12th round and now the 13th. He grabs Mike Williams and Jahan Dotson. Do you think Mike Williams is getting penalized too much because of his injury issues that he falls to the 12th round, given that he's catching passes from Aaron Rodgers this year? Or is it baked in and this is what we should expect from him because, it is still a new offense, a new quarterback, new head coach, new everything there. Mike Williams at the beginning of the 12th round, Ferrell.
This is gotta see it time. I want to see what it looks like on the field. You got a quarterback with a million years experience, and you got Williams with a million years experience. Right. But I've also got the quarterback that's not showing up at the mandatory minicamp. How do you develop that sense? Plus, he has Malachi Corley there, who I expect will play and will contribute. So I don't know what the future is for Mike in this offense, but I would be willing to throw a 12th round draft pick out there. But I will tell you this, is as we look at these receivers, we're seeing a lot of receiver potential that we can predict has the opportunity to score you significant fantasy points. And we go back to the beginning of the draft. Where are the running backs that we can predict? Now we're dealing with maybe and might. And
right.
That's why I admire what teams 11 and 12 have done. And, Terry has put together a great team. He's team 3, right? Singletary and Davis. I think that's tremendous. So these guys know what they're doing and they're adding to it. And it's impressive.
Singletary is the Saquon Barkley replacement in New York. And I say that because behind them, you have Tyrone Tracy, you have Eric Gray. I don't think either one of those guys are necessarily a big threat to be the number 1 guy. Singletary's actually done it before. Are we undervaluing him? He goes. I'll look at the mojo on him in a second. Tonight he ended up going at the 903. His ADP normally is the 906. Is that too low for Singletary? I feel like I've had Singletary in a lot of dynasty leagues, and I always think I unfairly push him up my redraft boards because I own so many shares of him there. But I think this is a case this year. I know the Giants' offensive line isn't great. Still a starting running back, and it's the 9th round.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just stay real quiet about it. and hope he stays there.
Right. Yeah.
And because, but yes, he has 7th round value to me. I would take him. I would have no qualms about taking him and getting him in my lineup.
Yeah, especially at that price. I mean, that makes perfect sense there. So, the Indianapolis Colts just had 2 receivers picked in the 14th round of tonight's live draft coverage. Josh Downs at the 1403, and Adonai Mitchell at the 1407. Ferrell, between those 2 players, and let's throw team construction out of this, which Colts receiver would you rather have in the 14th round tonight? Would you rather have, and again, for redraft, would you rather have Downs or would you rather have Mitchell?
I like big receivers. I like big, strong receivers who can move. And that's exactly what Mitchell is. So that's where I'm going.
Are you surprised the difference? I mean, you look at Caleb Williams was the 101 in the NFL draft this year. Jaden Daniels was the 102. Yet it's Daniels going in the early 11th and Caleb Williams not going until the mid 14th. He ends up going to Frankie Bornoni here to back up Patrick Mahomes. That seems like quite the disparity. Is that the way you see the seasons going? Is Caleb Williams that much further below the type of year that Jaden Daniels is going to have in Washington?
We just don't know. And there's a lot of suspect around the players' timing issues, the three-man pass rush that he dealt with, and it took him a long time to get rid of the ball. And you can get rid of you can do that in college, but you can't necessarily do it in the pros. And there's a lot of curve at Chicago. Both for fantasy and for execution of real football. For a fantasy situation with Daniels, especially with the players that are around him, you begin to think, well, for fantasy purposes, this makes a little more sense because of the way all the players are lined up around him.
Right. One of the climbers over the course of the last month or so, getting back to Washington here, has been Ben Sinnott. Adam Hahn takes him tonight at the 1401 from the 12 spot as his 3rd tight end behind Laporta and Bowers. I look at, if I had that team, I would look at Laporta and Bowers and like, okay, I'll take a flyer in the 17th or 18th round here at tight end. But that wasn't the way that Hahn took. He went with Ben Sinnott here. What is your read on the type of season he's going to have this year? Are you with these FFPC drafters, Ferrell, that continue to push Sinnott higher and higher up redraft boards?
I think this is legitimate with where he's going. I don't think Mr. Hahn should have taken him here, but he could come on and defend his pick and tell me why he really likes the player, and I would easily agree with him. I just see, we just talked about Mitchell. I'm a big fan of Pearsall. I remain a big fan of Adam Thielen. And, Team 12 has how many wide receivers, Balky?
Team 12 has 5 wide receivers now.
5 wide receivers. I might have liked to have had another one of these receivers, rookie upside or veteran skill set. Because I do not believe that Thielen is going to go away in that offense. I think you're looking at a 70-catch player, and there's certain situations that might suggest that in matchups that he do better.
What's interesting about Carolina, and you bring up Thielen, like Deontay Johnson, I think does a lot of the things really well that Thielen does really well. And they also have Ian Thomas, who's been standing out in camp. They invested into Jatavian Sanders. I don't know who the deep threat is, if Leggett is going to be that guy that gets downfield or Mingo. But they have a lot of guys that I think are going to give Bryce Young, and I don't necessarily know if this is a good thing. I'm going to paint it as a good thing. I don't know if it's a good thing. But, Tom Brady, I'm using Tom Brady and Bryce Young in the same sentence. So just
go ahead.
Bear with me here. I know this sounds ridiculous. Tom Brady said for years that the NFL game is won within the first 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, right? And you have all these weapons there that really excel in being possession receivers, guys getting open over the middle, maybe not game breakers, but guys that know how to get open to keep the chains moving. You have Jonathan Brooks in that backfield as well. And I wonder, I know you will have to lid lift at some point, and maybe Mingo and Leggett are the guys that can do that. But I think there's a lot of options there in that, in that possession receiver archetype that Carolina has. And that's what's so fascinating to me. Like, I think I'd be much more likely to take Adam Thielen than I would Deontay Johnson because we saw what Thielen did last year.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I'm willing to pay the price on Johnson if he's going to be, a quasi rich man's Adam Thielen this year, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think the proverbial jury is still out on Johnson. It's a change of scenery for Johnson, and Thielen is a leader both in the locker room and on the field, and for a young quarterback. But I really also want to take a look here at Team 6 because I love everything they've done since the 11th round. And Jacoby Myers, let's just I'm not banging the drum for all the Raiders, but I certainly am banging it for Jacoby Myers. This is a perfect receiver. We're talking about how we like, and we've seen it in the chat a little bit, how we all like these strong, big receivers.
Yeah.
What is Jacoby Myers? He's done it for years. He's strong. He's a big receiver. How many catches did we get last year from Pittman when he was working with Minshew in that offense? The same sort of accuracy, downfield capabilities exist with Myers. I really like that matchup. And it amazes me that this player is available in the 11th round.
The other thing I'll point out with that's Craig Bruder's team who's drafting 6 tonight. Look at these last few picks, like Jaleel McLaughlin, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Legette, all young players and players with unknown upside. Well, those are the players you want to take at this point in the draft. McLaughlin and Mitchell and Legette could all hit, which is probably not likely, but one of them could. And then the other two become expendable on the waiver wire, and all of a sudden, boom, you have a guy that you can maybe not necessarily count on every week, but definitely count on when the matchup is in their favor for sure. So that's a good job, as you pointed out, by Bruder there to get those 3 young guys. We were talking about let's go to the chat because there's been a lot of good messages in there about some of the latest picks. Doobie says, I can't help to think Khalil Herbert is going to be an impact guy this year. He's produced every chance he's had. Someone gives him the chance, he could smash. Now, Khalil Herbert ended up being drafted tonight at the 15-10 by Bill Wonky. And Herbert, Herbert's a guy that I'm fine taking some stabs at, but I don't know how I feel about him on that team. Like, I feel like the Bears needed to get somebody else to fulfill that third running back role and let Herbert go, because I know they like Roschon Johnson. They obviously like DeAndre Swift as well. I just don't know in redraft how long I can keep Herbert on my team as long as he's the third guy for the Bears.
That's the truth. You want to get guys a little bit further up the depth chart. Boy, we have had some great commentary. Boy, these drafts bring out the commentary, don't they, Paul?
Yeah.
In every round here, and the kickers are going too early, but in every round here, you see great value. And I'm very impressed. We move over here to team number 12. That's Mr. Hahn. And I'm very impressed with what he's done with his backup quarterback, because there's a player that I love that word, smash. I've been studying some of the millennial words, Balky. Are you doing this? Do you know that a girl that takes too many selfies of herself is known as bop?
Yeah, that's
Did
true.
you know that?
No, I that's the first time I didn't know there was a word for it. I just know the type of person. A bop, B-O-P.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure my kids will tell me that at some point. Let's go back to the YouTube chat. Roderick Dobson, who's been chiming in with a lot of good stuff tonight. John Mechie is being steamed up by his quarterback and head coach. Can Stroud reasonably support at least 4 wide receivers and a tight end? Roderick, I'm pretty confident in saying no, he cannot support 4 receivers and a tight end. That is mission impossible, if you ask me. I don't see that happening. The good thing about Mechie is he is going so low right now. So if you want to draft him with one of your last few picks, go ahead, do it, and see what happens in the first few weeks of the season. I think Schultz is all right. I think he's going to be okay this year. But those other 3 receivers just make it it's going to be really, really tough to be the 4th receiver in this offense and maybe the 6th passing option. So no, I don't see him supporting that much. Ferrell, you want to weigh on that? In on that?
And Mechie, Mechie will be a success for the Houston Texans if he catches 40 balls in a supportive role. That'll be a big, big success. And but in his limited role with the team, if something were to happen, one of those other players, I think you'll see enough of Mechie to say this could be a replacement receiver for me should someone at Houston get banged up.
The other chat here, we were talking about the Panthers receivers here before. Doobie says, if Bryce steps up, but the wide receivers don't, couldn't we get 2 viable tight ends in Carolina, or is that too big of a stretch? In my opinion, yeah, that's way too big of a stretch. That's one of those things where you're stretching the rubber band and stretching it, and it just snaps on you. That's what would happen if you're expecting anything from Sanders and Thomas this year. One or the other, sure, I could see it. Don't ask me which one it's going to be, though.
I'm still waiting to get one explosive tight end.
That's really cool. And this is an important thing to point out with Doobie. Are they still allowed to fade defense and kicker until first waiver run? No, they are not.
You gotta be legal, dude.
Right? Yes,
get a legal lineup.
Gotta have a legal lineup. So everybody will have to draft a legal lineup, which includes 1 kicker and 1 defense as they start going off the boards here. I think Brandon Aubrey was our first kicker off the board at the 15 to Derek Greer tonight, in the 15th round to Derek Greer tonight. Ferrell, a guy I've been kind of getting excited about a little bit, ended up going to Bill Wonky here as wide receiver 76 at the 1603 tonight, and that's Wan'Dale Robinson. I understand Malik Neighbors is going to get all he can handle, right? At the New York Giants all-you-can-eat buffet, Malik Neighbors is bringing 2 fully loaded plates back to his table. That's how much the Giants are going to give him. But Wan'Dale Robinson, I don't think we should forget about him. You know, he's probably bringing back the side of crab legs, but he's still got the big, he's still got a big piece of steak on his plate. I think he's going to be interesting this year. I know Jalen Hyatt is getting some love. Permar's not in the chat right now. Every time I bring up Jalen Hyatt, I think Permar dies a little bit. But Jalen Hyatt has been getting a little bit of love. I think Wan'Dale Robinson's really intriguing, and I've talked with some players, high stakes players who are also Giants fans, and they really think that Wan'Dale Robinson's going to be pretty active in the slot this year. And to get him in the 16th round, he's not a guy I want to get in every draft, but I want to get him in a lot of drafts.
10, 11, 12th round for the Kentucky rookie when he came out, as I recall at Planet Hollywood, sometimes 9 round. And, Sterling Shepard has finally left the building, Balky. So, yes, there is significant upside for Wan'Dale. Don't wait too long, but that's a player I like. I take another wide receiver that I really, really like, Rashad Bateman. That's a player I can get behind at this cost, because I think over the last few games last year, I begin to see things in his game that has changed, and the way that his running back or his quarterback is going to attack the game this year is going to be different. I really like Bateman and Likely in that offense. Is Likely gone yet?
Yeah, he went. I saw him go 13-3 at the tight end.
Yeah, there he is
tonight.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. John Terry takes Likely there with Andrews. Normally, I'm not a fan of drafting a player's backup. But you normally think about that situation as a running back thing, not necessarily a tight end thing. When you're going for $1 million, as all 12 of these guys are doing, does it make sense to grab Likely if you have Andrews?
Yes, very much so. And matter of fact, in drafts that I would be very aggressive in picking up Likely if I couldn't make my decision. And I realize a guy as Andrews is close to me. Likely is going to shoot up the board, because I'm going to get that player. That is one of the greatest handcuffs to steal this year. And I think Likely, even with Andrews, could have some standalone value in this season.
What about the 1705 pick tonight, the 80th receiver off the board? He goes to Remy LeBeau as his number 7 receiver. Luke McCaffrey, a guy in a lot of my dynasty rookie leagues I missed out on because it seemed like he was always going higher than I was willing to take him. What are the chances he ends up being the slot guy for Jaden Daniels this year?
Much, much more than your 0% of no. I know. These are just people that know how to play football. Yeah. You want to invest in players that come from a football culture, and this player will get it. He'll understand where to line up. He'll understand how to be a player when he's not on the field and not at practice. You're investing a 17th round pick in but if this was the Big Short, these would be the AAA bonds, buddy. This is where it is.
The team from the 9 spot tonight, we've been talking about him a lot, and I want to bring it back to Joe Ligon's team because he was the one team that started off with 3 running backs. He's only drafted 1 running back since then. In the 9th round, it was Nick Chubb, and I have a lot of questions. Right, it seems like the deeper we get into drafting season, the more questions I have about Nick Chubb. But he has drafted, I believe, now 10 wide receivers, Ferrell. What do you make of this drafting strategy in a managed league where you have to submit waivers, you have to submit lineups? I'm fine with this in a best ball. I think it could work out. But when you have to pick 2 of those receivers, maybe more, out of 10 every week, that can be a little confusing and tough to do unless you just look at this from the standpoint of like, okay, some of these guys are going to be gone by the time August and September rolls around, and I'll fill it with other positions. But this is an interesting strategy when you're drafting in late June to load up on receivers after you start off with 3 straight running backs.
And that's what he has to do when he did that. And I like these receivers. I don't see the one that's going to break out and get what he needs. If he has a crystal ball and can understand when to start Shaheed, if I'm right about Bateman, Palmer is more than just a flash player. And, there's a lot of ifs in that mix. And perhaps he should have started pounding wide receivers a couple rounds earlier. Although I'm not so sure what he would have got.
Right.
So, if he could have figured out a way to get Jacoby Myers, that might have been a good idea.
Why? I meant to ask you this before when you talk about Bateman. What is it about Bateman that has you intrigued this year about him?
The way he played at the end of the year, the fact that he finally started falling in line with his quarterback, and what having Henry there means, how teams are going to try to change the way that they attempt to contain Lamar and his legs and how they have to handle Henry. So I think if you have more of that defense, opposition defenses keeping their heads in the backfield, Bateman will begin to have less physical upset, less bigger guys pushing on him. He's going to get a quicker release. He's going to be available in the middle of the field. It's going to open up a little bit.
Roman Wilson went in the 14th round tonight. I have not seen a third Pittsburgh receiver go off the board, but that was Vladimir Dukic's pick here in the 14th round as his number 6 receiver. He's only got 7 total receivers on his team. What can Roman Wilson be successful this year as a rookie, Ferrell? I have my doubts in that offense.
Doovie doesn't think so. He doesn't think most of these guys are going to make it. So I'm falling in there. To be determined. And some of these guys, we got to see them. We really got to see how they're working and how they look in the preseason. I can't tell how, keep beating the drum for fantasy players to invest in watching preseason games. You don't have to watch, beyond the second quarter.
Right.
But, watch some of these guys, get a feel for the timing issues of and the physicality that they bring to the game. It's going to be it's going to be your best choice to figure out how these rookies are fitting in.
I want to talk about some of these late round tight ends that I think are intriguing. And maybe we've talked about them on the show before, so forgive me. But some guys that are picking up some steam. Jelani Woods, tight end 26, 1609, goes to Vladimir Dukic's team here as his number 3 tight end. What do you make of Woods? Because he's been getting some pub from his coaching staff in Indianapolis. I know the Dizzle was a fan of his coming out of college because of how athletic he was. Mm-hmm. Will this year be the year of Woods? There's a lot of pass catchers on that Colts team.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we know who this player is, and we love the athlete, but we're trying to project onto him that he's going to step out of a good role player into a big fantasy scorer, and I don't see it.
What about Colby Parkinson in Los Angeles? Obviously, Higbee is coming off the ACL injury, and the tight end room is kind of bare there. Parkinson is a guy that I've seen talked up a little bit as a late round sleeper, but you want these sleepers at some point to wake up. Is Parkinson is he going to wake up at some point this year and give us some good fantasy goodness?
Late round productivity through opportunity is a key to success in this situation. And yes. And so if you question the player, go back and look at his college play. Go back and take a look at what you saw back in the day. I think that is a very good case to make for a rookie tight end. And I would probably make that for any tight end that has a limited history in this league is to just, again, go back to movement. That's why I like Bowers so much, and success at the highest levels of football. But I like Parkinson better than I like our guy over at the New York Jets, Theo, or New York Giants, Theo, and God, he's my favorite tight end athlete of the whole bunch.
Theo Johnson is?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I think that it's all about how do you bring in that athleticism into being good at football, right? But Johnson, again, 20th round pick. If you see it, great. If you don't, you can kind of cut bait if you have to. The other not young tight end, but late round tight end I want to talk about is another guy that's been moving up a little bit, Jonnu Smith-Farrell. I keep hearing about how this guy, did a lot in Arthur Smith's offense that didn't have a whole lot of other bright spots, probably because of Arthur Smith in part. But now he goes to a team where they love to accentuate your strengths. And Smith still has some strengths, and this could be an interesting guy this year for sure.
I don't think I want to be in business with Jonnu Smith.
Even that late?
Even that late, because I'm taking I'm taking the tight end position seriously in the FFPC. And I want to, I don't want to go in with more than 3, and my third guy is going to go a lot higher than that. So I'm going to let somebody else have that player.
The draft is now done. We have seen a fun draft tonight, 75 minutes. All these guys clearly knew what they were doing. I think we were pretty even-handed in our coverage here tonight. We talked pretty much about every team at some point, sometimes different players twice. This was a fun draft. They always are. And I always say you have to throw ADP out the window because you never know how somebody's going to react. You think about in the draft tonight where I put it up on the YouTube chat right now. Bill Wonky, who was drafting in the 10th spot. You were spot on, Ferrell. He messed up his cue in the 5th round. He wanted to grab Kenneth Walker, and he hoped Kittle fell to him. So he ends up drafting George Kittle. Kenneth Walker goes with the next pick there. So it was good.
Well, Wonky, you're a daredevil genius to be in this league and to admit that. I would have timed out 4 times in this draft because, again, I am a wonder of the slow draft. So I'm proud of you. If that's your only mistake, that ain't gonna sink you.
Right, that's true. Jimmy Williams talking about Team 3 getting Eric Gray. That was a boom pick for him. That is John Terry's team drafting 3rd overall. So he gets not only Devin Singletary, but he gets Eric Gray, a couple of shares of that New York Giants running game. So good on you. He also gets Deontay Foreman, who I'm starting to like more and more as well. We'll wrap things up here shortly. If you do have any questions about any of the teams or anything you want to point them out now, and we'll get to them because we do have some time left on the show. We'll get to Roderick Dobson's question here. How do you handle the Cleveland defense? That's certainly top 5, but has a brutal schedule. Do you stream another during the season? I do have the Browns defense on a couple of dynasty teams, and I do plan on keeping another defense around because they're not all going to be great matchups for the Browns. I think you'll be able to be shrewd enough to pick up a fringe top 12 defense off the waiver wire on the leagues or on the weeks that the Browns defense isn't great. Typically, I like to stream defenses anyway, Ferrell. I don't like to trot out the same defense every single week, no matter how good they are. So Browns are fine if you want to draft them, but know that you probably got to still soak in another draft pick on another defense too.
Unless you've got Baltimore, because I understand that Derrick Henry's going to play middle linebacker some too. Yeah, I say I'm high on Baltimore.
If exactly. He'd make a hell of a linebacker. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, these guys have been fantastic tonight. I really love, our comments. We missed some of our regular guys, so it's a thrill to have so many familiar names and meeting some new games. I want to meet everyone at Planet Hollywood because I will be relaxed and having a good time. And here, I'd like to invite everyone to come to Kentucky because I don't care where you live. As long as you come to Kentucky Live, you can play in Kentucky. So it's a wonderful thing to do. And, if anyone would like to, please let me hear from you. Just go over there and create an account because we'd like to see you. KFFSC.com.
KFFSC.com is where to go for that, for sure, Ferrell. And I would encourage everybody to do that.
You got us coming to Tom Smith. We've got at least 3 of the guys that drafted tonight. Tom Smith and Jeremy Brock and
John Terry.
John, I don't think John's coming, but Derek Greer is.
Nice. Derek Greer's coming to Kentucky?
Yeah, online and already committed for 2025. Yeah.
Excellent.
So we're already dealing with our 2025 commitment. So.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Ferrell, a gentleman and a scholar, as always. I want to thank you for putting up with this hectic schedule this week and doing not 1 but 2 shows. As a reward, take the week off next week.
No.
Yeah, absolutely. Do whatever you do.
I'll just have to do more work doing something else.
Right.
So none of it will be as fun as this.
That is the case, my friend. KFFSC.com is where to go for that. Ferrell Elliott, thank you. Gentleman and a scholar. We'll talk with you again on July 12th.
Thank you, sir.
That is Ferrell Elliott, the definitive commissioner of fantasy football. I'm Eric Balkman, wanting to thank all the drafters tonight, all of you who hung out in the chat room, all of you who are listening later, streaming, downloading later. Really appreciate it. We are going to do this again. In fact, let me give you the quick and dirty on what's going on with the FFPC live streams over the next week plus. The HSFF Hour will be back. We're taking the week off next week. We'll be back Friday, July 12th at 10 p.m. Eastern time. More Fantasy Pros Championship live draft coverage. We'll be covering another live draft that evening on July 12th. If I'm going to be in the Northwoods of Wisconsin all next week, I will not have a good enough internet connection for a video cast, so no HSFF Hour. However, since you guys are so conditioned to watching your computer screens at 10 p.m. Eastern every Friday night, Aiden LaCorey and Dave Terpoli will broadcast a Fantasy Pros Championship draft live at 10 p.m. on Friday. So no HSFF Hour, but the FFPC YouTube will still be live for that as well. Don't forget this Tuesday, we have more live draft coverage with the FFPC. I believe it's Best Ball Tournament. I could be wrong. I think maybe it's Fantasy Pros Championship, but we'll have live draft coverage on Tuesday night for you as well. No high stakes fantasy football show next week as well. That's why we doubled up this week. Go back and watch them at the Better Sports Network channels, or the FFPC socials as well. We had Sean Siegel from RotoViz and the Stealing Bananas podcast on this past Monday. And then from Fantasy Points, Roto World, Player Profiler, and 1 Week Season, Mark Garcia at HiLoFF. That's right, where you know him on X. He co-hosted with me last night. Really, really good insight into game theory and best ball tournament drafting strategy for volume players, or even if you're not a volume player. That was on last night. You can watch it at the same places, the replay of that as well. The July edition of the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown will air Tuesday, July 9th at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So we'll get that July episode for you fresh and hot on July 9th. That is not this coming week, but the week after. If you are looking for drafting action, let me tell you, we have Classic Dynasty Leagues, startups going off tomorrow. Empire Dynasty Leagues going off tomorrow. The FFPC Best Ball and Superflex Best Ball tournaments going off each and every day. Slow drafts, live drafts, the FFPC main event. And don't forget about the Fantasy Pros Championship, the draft you just watched tonight. You think you can do it better than these 12 guys? Get in and draft a team. Maybe you could win the $1 million. Your next opportunity to do so is going to happen in about a half hour. When yours truly is commissioning the midnight draft, we were going to get we were getting updates on how many teams were left. About a half hour ago, there was only 5 left. That one's going to fill. I'm pretty confident in it. So make sure if it's not filled yet, you're hopping in, and you could draft a team tonight as well in that format, or in the Fantasy Pros Championship, and maybe you could be the next FFPC millionaire. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, as many of you have been doing, share it with your friends and enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live, which will be Tuesday night live draft coverage with Aiden LaCorey and Dave Terpoli. That's going to be a blast. I will enjoy my week off in the Northwoods, but I'll be thinking about each and every one of you. Thanks so much for watching, listening, streaming, downloading. It was awesome to have you, and we will talk with you again very soon. Your weekend officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Ferrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you again next week.
Want to tell everybody that I just checked. There are 4 teams left in that midnight draft tonight. And like I said, that's going to fill. We still got about a half hour. 'Tis the season. Everybody's hopping in drafts right now. So you have 4 opportunities to be the hero tonight and potentially the next FFPC millionaire. I'll see you in the draft rooms. Thanks for watching, everybody. You guys are the best viewers in the podcasting industry. Best viewers and best listeners. You guys do it all. Thank you so much.